Hello everyone, welcome to the Icewine knowledge class. Today, we are going to talk about one of the most unique and luxurious wines in the world, Icewine. When you see the name, don't be misled by the name and think it's just wine with ice added. This is a type of wine that is extremely complex from grape cultivation to fermentation, and is known as liquid gold. Last year, we went to Canada's Icewine Festival. Icewine is so sweet and rich, with a mellow mouthfeel. It is truly a dream drink in many wine lovers' hearts. We will also take you in future videos to experience the atmosphere of Canada's Icewine Festival, the delicious taste of Icewine, and the passion of the people in the Niagara region for Icewine. We hope you will continue to follow our videos. But can you imagine, in the icy, snowy winter nights, the production process of every bottle of iced wine is filled with challenges and miracles, embodying the gifts of nature and the craftsmanship of the winemakers. So, what exactly is Icewine, and why is it so famous in Canada? In this series of lessons, we will take you into a wondrous world covered in ice and snow, exploring this precious fine wine known as liquid gold. We will start from its historical origins and its deep connection with Canada, to the unique grape cultivation methods, special harvesting techniques, and particular juice pressing processes, then to the most exquisite fermentation method, and finally to its flavors and tasting notes, step by step unveiling the mysterious veil of Icewine and exploring the legendary stories behind it. Okay, let's start the journey. Part 1. The history of Icewine. From accidental discovery to world-class vintage, the story of Icewine began in the cold winters of Europe, yet it blooms with its brightest brilliance in the icy, snowy lands of Canada. Today, we'll journey through time from 18th century rural Germany all the way to the modern Niagara Peninsula. Let's take a look at how Icewine, step by step, became a world-renowned sweet wine legend. This is not just the history of a wine, it's a story of wild adventure in nature and innovation. Buckle up and fire up the time machine. We're heading out right now. According to most historical records, our story begins in 1794 in a small village in Germany's Franconia region. The wines made from the local Riesling grapes were so delicious that they were renowned far and wide. That very winter, an unexpected blizzard arrived far earlier than anyone had foreseen, forcing the winemakers who were just gearing up for the busy grape harvest to abandon the vineyards and hurry back home to take shelter from the biting cold.
Oh dear, it's freezing out here. Hurry home.
Following the blizzard, a severe frost sets in. After the storm, winemakers standing in the frost-covered vineyards watch in dismay as the grapes, damaged by the cold, reach maturity, leaving them deeply disheartened. Most of the grapes have already frozen. They look shriveled, yet they are not completely solid.
Oh no, this is awful. The grapes are ruined after all the effort we've put in this whole year.
They refuse to give up and are looking for a way to salvage them. But are these grapes still any good? A winemaker, curious, plucks a grape and pops it into his mouth. And to his surprise, it hasn't frozen solid. The tiny bit of juice left inside is incredibly sweet. And it also has a rich, honey-like flavor. Then the winemakers had a sudden spark of inspiration. The grapes were already frozen, and tossing them would be such a waste, with a bit of juice still inside, and so incredibly sweet. Why not give winemaking a try? I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Worse than just throwing them away? So they went for it. They picked the frozen grapes, carefully pressed out the juice, and got to work making the wine. Because these grapes were so high in sugar, the fermentation process was unusually slow. After several months, the new wine was finally ready. They couldn't wait to pour a glass, carefully observing the color of the wine. So beautiful, like amber. They took a gentle sniff. So fragrant, there's the scent of honey, and some fruity notes I can't quite name. They took a tiny sip. Wow, the taste is amazing. I've never had a wine this delicious. They were overjoyed, dancing and celebrating this unexpected delight, and gave their new wine a name, Icewine. That's the German word for ice wine. So they shared their exquisite wine with friends and neighbors. Icewine quickly won everyone's hearts, and soon became popular all across Germany. It even made its way to Austria, another region famous for cold climate winemaking. Although this story is filled with romantic charm, it also reflects the very essence of iced winemaking. Extremely cold and lucky accident. It was precisely the cold winters of Germany's Franconia region, along with the winemaker's passion and innovation, that gave birth to this exquisite ice wine. Just like China's black tea, Britain's penicillin, America's potato chips, or even the discovery of the law of universal gravitation, the invention of the steam engine, and the harnessing of electricity, many accidental discoveries have brought enormous changes and progress to our lives. This reminds us that sometimes unexpected surprises are hidden in the most ordinary moments. We should nurture our curiosity and spirit of exploration, and be bold in trying new things and innovating. Only then can we continue to discover new possibilities and contribute to the progress of human society. However, because the production of ice wine is extremely dependent on weather conditions, its earliest appearances were purely accidental, more a gift of nature than a deliberate craft. For a long time, it never developed into a mainstream wine, nor could it be produced on a consistent basis. After all, the weather was simply far too unpredictable to guarantee the freezing conditions required for ice wine. It wasn't until the Hafner family in Austria made a significant claim. In 1971, they intentionally produced what they called Austria's first deliberately crafted ice wine. Before this moment, every ice wine in history had been the result of pure chance, a natural accident rather than a planned winemaking process. It was not until 1982 that ice wine was officially written into German wine law. From that point on, ice wine was formally recognized and granted the same quality classification as Biere Naslis, the category reserved for individually selected, highly concentrated sweet wines. And over time, the harvesting standards were gradually refined and perfected, ensuring the quality and consistency of ice wine production. Afterwards, in both Germany and Austria, major wineries began to plant ice wine vineyards on a wide and stable scale. They moved towards systematic, large-scale production, transforming ice wine into a truly premium sweet wine. Although ice wine originated in Germany, it was Canada that truly brought it to the world stage. The story of ice wine crossed the Atlantic in the 20th century, arriving in Canada's Niagara Peninsula. Does this place sound familiar? You're right. It's the region of Niagara Falls, one of the world's 3 famous waterfalls. This vast northern land of Canada is renowned for its snow and ice, and defined by its harsh winters. Here, ice and snow are not only a striking part of Canada's natural landscape, but have also become cultural symbols of the country. Think about it. What kind of impression do people usually have of Canadians? For example, ice hockey was born in Canada. The sport quickly spread across the country and became the national sport of this country. It's truly a paradise for winter sports, with skiing, ice skating, and ice hockey all deeply loved by people across the country. Every year, the country hosts ice and snow festivals to celebrate the arrival of winter. Canada boasts magnificent ice and snow landscapes, from the Columbia Glacier in the Rocky Mountains to the frozen Cascades of Niagara Falls. The scenery is truly breathtaking. These natural wonders have shaped people's perception of the country, establishing Canada as the world's premier producer of high-quality ice wine. It's similar to how, when we think of champagne, we immediately associate it with the world's finest sparkling wines. The Burgundy region is renowned for producing the finest Pinot Noir, while the romantic Bordeaux has given the world exceptional Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. On this cold and pristine land, the harsh winters provide Canada with the perfect conditions for producing the world's finest ice wine. Although Canada has only entered this field in recent decades, through the efforts of several generations of winemakers, people have quickly mastered its essence. So much so that Canadian ice wine is now considered among the very best in the world. This is a true reflection of the people's deep passion for ice and snow. The story of Canadian ice wine begins in the 1970s. A 28-year-old named Carl Kaiser immigrated to Canada in 1969. He planned to pursue a degree in chemistry and aspired to become a professor. Kaiser had a deep passion for wine from a young age. As a young man, he helped with the harvest at the vineyard of his future wife's grandfather. When Kaiser first arrived in Canada, he brought with him the refined European palate for wine. He was disappointed by the overly sweet and simple local wines, and often criticized the poor quality of Ontario wines. It was then that he met Donald Ziraldo, a graduate of the University of Guelph's agriculture program. Donald firmly believed that Ontario could produce much better wines, and he convinced Kaiser to join him in this endeavor. "Brother, let's do this together. We can make world-class wine here," he told him. In 1975, they founded the first winery in Ontario in 50 years to be officially licensed for winemaking. This marked the beginning of what would become the famous Inniskillen Winery. In the summer of 1983, during a lively gathering hosted by Kaiser, he discussed ice wine with many immigrant winemakers from Austria and Germany. Kaiser reached an agreement with Ewald Reif, a grape grower born in Germany. They decided to reserve a portion of their vineyards, specifically for ice wine production, and received support from numerous other wineries as well. Although the first year yielded only a small amount of ice wine due to birds feeding on the grapes, the outcome was still exciting. The following year, the winery began using bird nets to protect the harvest. In 1984, Kaiser produced about 900 bottles of ice wine, each in a 375 milliliters format. The label read Icewine Vidal, English, ice wine, and the wine was released on December 1st, 1985, priced at $18.5 per bottle. This ice wine went on to become the only Canadian wine to win a gold medal at the 1986 Intervin International Competition in Toronto. 5 years later, he won the Grand Prix gold medal in Bordeaux. Often referred to as the Oscar of the wine world, this was the first Canadian wine to achieve a truly significant award on the international stage. From that moment on, Canadian ice wine took the world by storm. Even the Germans had to admit, these new world producers really know their craft. In the next episode, I'll introduce the climate and soil of the Niagara region and explain why it has become the perfect cradle for ice wine. If you're interested, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment to encourage us. Thank you all for watching, and see you in the next episode.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Icewine Knowledge class. In our previous episode, we shared a beautiful story filled with unexpected twists. Icewine traveled all the way from the villages of 18th century Germany to today's Niagara region. In this episode, I'm going to take you through why Icewine was able to take root in Niagara and ultimately flourish into the world-renowned wine it is today. We'll take a closer look at the climate and soil of the Niagara region and discover the answers through its unique conditions. The perfect combination of climate and geology. Part 2. The geography and climate of the Niagara Peninsula. The perfect cradle for ice wine. Why was Canada's ice wine industry able to rise later yet surpass the rest? The answer lies in the Niagara Peninsula, where the region's climate and geographic conditions create the perfect cradle for producing ice wine. The Niagara Peninsula sits at 43 degrees north latitude, the same latitude as Northern California, and even slightly farther south than the Burgundy region in France. The Niagara Peninsula is located in the Great Lakes region, and, like Burgundy in France, Germany and Austria, Oregon in the US and New Zealand, it is considered a cool climate wine-growing area. These regions are ideal for growing grapes such as Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Riesling, which tend to have high aromatics, high acidity, and produce wines that are lighter, fruitier, and more vibrant. The region's unique and favorable geographical conditions have made it one of the world's top ice wine producing areas. Number 1. The Lake Effect. Lake Ontario's air conditioning magic. The Niagara Peninsula is located in the Great Lakes region and belongs to a cool continental climate zone. Normally, regions with this type of climate have more extreme weather changes. In other words, their summers are hotter and their winters are colder. In cold winters, cold temperatures are one of the major limiting factors in grape cultivation. When the temperature drops below -20 degrees Celsius, the grapevines can suffer serious winter damage. Fortunately, the Niagara Peninsula is a unique geological region located in the southern part of Ontario, Canada. It is bordered by Lake Ontario to the north, Lake Erie to the south, and the Niagara River to the east. And that's exactly why we call it a peninsula. The lakes surrounding the peninsula slowly release heat during the winter, making the temperatures here more stable than in inland areas. This helps the grapes have enough time to fully ripen in the fall, experience consistent freezing conditions in the winter, and reduces the risk of frost damage in the spring. There are many ways to measure the potential for grape cultivation. The most common method is growing degree days, or GDD. This index is calculated from April 1st to October 31st, as the sum of all daily average temperatures which are above 10 degrees Celsius. Below 10 degrees Celsius, grape growth is minimal or even completely halted. A GDD in a season that is too long can cause grapes to gradually lose acidity, delicate aromas, and their fresh taste. On the other hand, a GDD in a season that is too short prevents grapes from fully ripening, resulting in low sugar levels, and because of the shorter growth cycle, increasing the risk of disease and frost damage later in the season. Typically, excellent grape-growing regions have a GDD between 1000 and 1800 degree. For cooler climate vineyards, the optimal GDD is between 1200 and 1500 degree. This chart shows the median GDD values for major cool climate grape-growing regions, compared using growing degree days. We can see that the grape-growing conditions in the Niagara Peninsula can rival some of the world's top cool climate regions, such as the famous Burgundy region in France, the renowned Napa Valley in the USA, as well as regions in Oregon and New Zealand. The most critical stage in the grape growth cycle is from flowering period, which occurs roughly between June 10th and 18th, to harvest period, typically from October to November. This period is called the growing season for grapes, and it usually lasts about 100 to 112 days. Let's take a look at this chart. The red line represents the year-round temperature curve in the Niagara region, which is similar to other well-known grape-growing regions around the world. The Niagara region is highly suitable for grape cultivation. During the growing season, the climate is warm enough to provide grapes with sufficient time to fully ripen. Even more importantly, the cold winters in Niagara bring temperatures quickly down below -8 degrees Celsius in December and January. This allows the grapes to freeze properly, which is essential for producing ice wine. At this time, the grapevines are in dormancy, so they are usually unaffected. However, these low temperatures cause the water in the grapes to crystallize, allowing the production of true ice wine. As we just mentioned, -8 degree is a very critical temperature point in the ice wine production process. This number doesn't come out of nowhere. It is the result of decades of experimentation and fine-tuning by winemakers. -8 degree has proven to be the optimal balance. It ensures that the grapes are sufficiently frozen inside, concentrating the juice, while still preserving both yield and flavor. Every winter, winemakers closely monitor the weather forecast. As soon as temperatures drop below -8 degree for several consecutive hours, winemakers treat it like a celebration, organizing nighttime hand harvesting. This has even given rise to a famous slogan in Niagara's ice wine world, "Feeling great at -8 degrees." The principle behind this -8 degree threshold and the Canadian wine regulations regarding -8 degree will be explained in detail in the later session. Prolonged cold weather ensures that the grapes freeze completely without rotting after thawing. At the same time, the lake effect of Lake Ontario helps keep temperatures from dropping below -20 degree, preventing the grapevines from being damaged by extreme cold. Number 2. Suitable soil. The 5-star meal for grapevines. The backbone of the Niagara Peninsula is the Niagara Escarpment. It is a steep slope, ranging from 30 to 50 meters in height. This escarpment starts in New York State, USA, runs across the entire Niagara Peninsula, and continues all the way to the Bruce Peninsula in northern Ontario, stretching over 700 kilometers in total. This escarpment gives the Niagara Peninsula its unique soil characteristics. To the north of the escarpment lies a flat plain, formed from lacustrine clay, sand, and gravel deposited at the bottom of ancient Lake Iroquois. Lake Iroquois was a massive lake that existed before the last ice age, which later evolved into the modern Great Lakes. The bedrock of the Niagara escarpment contains siliceous sandstone, iron-rich sandstone, limestone, and shale, formed during the Devonian period. Its soils are made up of a mix of different types, including clay, silty clay, loam, and sandy soils. These soils are usually very deep and contain abundant minerals from the various bedrock types, providing rich nutrients for the vineyards. Around 12,000 years ago, Niagara Falls poured over the cliffs of the Niagara Escarpment near Queenstown. Since then, the falls have gradually moved downstream along the gorge for about 11 kilometers, finally reaching their current location, the iconic Horseshoe Falls of Niagara. This gave Canada a world-class natural wonder, attracting tens of millions of visitors every year. Let's take a moment to appreciate this magnificent Canadian landscape. Moreover, the rushing waters eroded the hard dolomite, as well as the softer sandstone beneath the limestone cap and the shale at the bottom, creating the 11-kilometer-long Niagara Gorge. This makes both the lower escarpment and the first-level terraces above it ideal for growing high-quality grapes. The soils in the Niagara region are mainly limestone clay and sandy soils. They are not only rich in minerals, but also have excellent drainage, which prevents water from accumulating around the grapevine roots and reduces the risk of root rot. All the wineries in the Niagara Peninsula are located along the Niagara Escarpment, either on the slopes of the northern escarpment or on the flat, gentle slopes south of the escarpment along the shores of Lake Ontario. This unique geological setting perfectly coincides with this special climate. This precise natural gift makes the Niagara Peninsula one of the very few regions in the world that can consistently produce high-quality ice wine. You could say this land is not only ideal for grape growing, but almost seems to be made for ice wine. In the next episode, we will focus on the Vintners Quality Alliance (VQA) of Canada and the strict standards it has set for ice wine production to ensure its healthy development. We'll take a look at the efforts people in this region make to produce world-class ice wine. If you enjoyed our program, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thank you for your support, and see you in the next episode.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Ice Wine Knowledge class. In our last episode, we introduced the Niagara Peninsula, with its unique climate and distinct geological features. Here, the perfect combination of climate and geology creates the ideal conditions for producing the world's finest ice wines. In this episode, we'll take a closer look at the VQA, the Vintners Quality Alliance of Canada. To ensure the healthy development of ice wine, strict standards have been set specifically for ice wine production, providing the essential foundation of people for the growth of Canadian ice wine. Part 3, Vintners Quality Alliance VQA. The strict VQA standards for Canadian ice wine. We all know that most of the world's great wine regions have set high standards for their finest wines. For example, France introduced the AOC system back in 1935, a designation that's still used today. Italy followed in 1963 with its DOC classification, and in 1971, Germany created the VDP system to define its top quality wines. In Ontario, the VQA system, the Vintners Quality Alliance, was officially launched in 1988. With the creation of VQA, Canada joined the ranks of the world's major wine-producing countries, establishing a series of strict regulations and setting the highest standards for its finest wines. And in 1990, British Columbia also joined the system.
The system later introduced the concept of sub-appellations in 2005. Canada has two major grape-growing regions, located in Ontario and British Columbia. The VQA recognizes four designated grape-growing sub-appellations in Ontario: the Niagara Peninsula, Palais Island, Prince Edward County, and the Lake Erie North Shore. In British Columbia, the VQA recognizes for sub-appellations the Okanagan Valley, the Similkameen Valley, the Fraser Valley, and Vancouver Island. The strict regulatory framework sets rules for winemakers on how they can use these highly specific geographic names on their labels. Only classic European grape varieties, known as Vitis vinifera, are allowed to be grown in VQA-approved vineyards, and the wine must be made from 100% Canadian-grown grapes. For varietal wines, at least 85% of the wine must be made from the grape variety clearly stated on the label, and it must showcase the typical flavors and characteristics of that variety. If a winemaker wants to specify the vineyard used for a wine, the winery must be located within a VQA-approved sub-appellation, and 100% of the grapes must come from that vineyard. In other words, grapes cannot be blended from different vineyard regions. Wines are evaluated by an independent panel of experts, and only those that meet or exceed the standards can receive VQA certification. To produce Icewine in Ontario, wines must meet all of the following VQA requirements. First, the wine must be produced by VQA-registered growers and winemakers, and the grapes must come from VQA-certified sub-appellations. This ensures the wine is of high quality and truly reflects the flavor characteristics of the grape variety in that region. Second, the finished wine must have a Brix level of 32 or higher, and a residual sugar content of at least 125 grams per liter. The juice pressed for winemaking must have a minimum Brix of 35, and this must be measured on site in the fermentation tank. Let's first explain Brix, sugar levels, and residual sugar content. Brix, also called boiling, is a standard used in North America to measure the sweetness of grape juice and wine. Brix indicates the percentage of soluble solids in the juice. Since most of the soluble solids in the juice are sugars, Brix effectively represents the sugar content in grape juice or wine. Winemakers can use it to calculate the potential alcohol level of the wine. Let's take a look at the table on the screen. Different countries and regions have their own ways of expressing sugar levels. Germany uses Ocho, France uses Baum, while in North America, the system is more straightforward. You can use this table to convert between them. As we can see, the Brix and residual sugar levels of ice wine are more than 10 times higher than those of ordinary wines. This is what gives ice wine its uniquely sweet flavor. Generally, the potential natural alcohol of a wine can be estimated by dividing the Brix value at harvest by 2. Canada requires a minimum juice Brix of 35, which is higher than Germany and Austria's requirement of 29.58. This is what allows Canada to produce ice wines that are richer, more luxurious, and sweeter than those from Germany, Austria, and other countries. Third, the alcohol in ice wine must come entirely from the natural sugars in the grapes used to produce the wine. The juice used to produce ice wine must come from 100% naturally frozen grapes. No sugar, honey, or any additive beyond the grape's naturally occurring sugars is allowed. The resulting ice wine, in terms of alcohol, sweetness, and aromatic flavors, must reflect 100% of the natural characteristics of the grapes themselves. Fourth, harvesting of ice grapes is only permitted after November 15th. This means that vineyards must have a certain cold hardiness. The grapes need to survive temperatures before November 15th without being damaged by frost. This ensures the grapes have a sufficient growing period and accumulated sugars. It also requires wineries to have strong frost and freeze protection capabilities. Setting the earliest harvest date also ensures that ice wine is made from juice pressed from grapes naturally frozen on the vine without any human intervention. After ice wine became popular worldwide, many wineries began artificially freezing grapes after harvest. In 2000, Canada, Germany, and Austria signed an international agreement on Icewine production standards and quality to protect consumers worldwide from counterfeit Icewine. These international standards also cleared major obstacles for Canadian Icewine to enter the European market. Shortly after the agreement was signed, the United States ruled that Icewine made from artificially frozen grapes cannot be labeled as Icewine. In 2003, the International Organization of Vine and Wine (OIV) in Paris supported this position, banning wines made from artificially frozen grapes from being called Icewine, or vin de glace in French and Icewine in German. Fifth, the minimum temperature for harvesting Icewine grapes is -8 degrees Celsius. As we mentioned in the previous episode, Niagara's climate is ideal for producing Icewine because the region can consistently stay below -8 degrees Celsius in winter, yet rarely drops below -20 degrees Celsius, which would damage the grapevines. In the world of Icewine, there's a commonly used formula for calculating sugar levels. By measuring the pressing temperature, winemakers can determine the relative density of the grape juice. Then, using a reference chart, they can convert that relative density into an accurate Brix value. Based on this formula, we can understand that the Brix level of Icewine juice is generally not determined by the grape variety or the natural sugar inside the grapes. Instead, it is determined almost entirely by the temperature at pressing, because Icewine juice is highly concentrated. The lower the pressing temperature, the higher the sugar level, resulting in a wine that is richer, sweeter, and more luscious. Of course, lower temperatures also mean lower yields and greater difficulty in production, which is exactly what makes true Icewine so precious. For example, if a batch of ice grapes is pressed at -9 degrees Celsius, the formula gives us a relative density of 1.174. Then, using the density to Brix conversion chart we mentioned earlier, we can calculate that the juice has a sugar level of 39 Brix. Every country sets its own rules for the maximum temperature at which ice grapes may be harvested and pressed. Germany, Austria, and the International Organization of Vine and Wine (OIV) all set this limit at -7 degrees Celsius. Canada, however, requires an even colder limit of -8 degrees Celsius. So when we compare the maximum harvest and pressing temperatures, along with the minimum Brix requirements, we can clearly see that Canada's standards are stricter than those of Germany, Austria, and other European Icewine producing regions. As we mentioned earlier, the lower the temperature during pressing, the higher the sugar concentration in the juice. But this also means the production cost increases dramatically, and the overall yield of the winery drops significantly. The lower the temperature, the more the grape juice is frozen, and the less juice can be pressed. According to Canadian and EU regulations, grapes may undergo partial or full freezing in the vineyard before they are harvested for true Icewine production. Winemakers can decide the exact moment of harvest. In Canada, they may harvest anytime after November 15th, as long as the temperature is -8 degrees Celsius or lower. In Germany and Austria, as long as the temperature reaches -7 degrees Celsius or lower, the grapes can be harvested. Technically speaking, when it comes to juice sugar levels and harvest temperatures, Canada has the highest standards in the world for Icewine production. This is why Canadian Icewine is even more precious. To ensure that producers maintain the high quality of Icewine, the VQA requires that, before winemaking, producers must verify the following in writing using a specified form: the harvest temperature for each picking, the planted area and tonnage of each specific crop, the Brix level of each batch of grape juice, the harvest date and time, the winery's pressing capacity. The VQA may randomly send inspectors to take samples of grape juice and wine to ensure they meet the standards. They conduct laboratory analyses as well as on-site sensory evaluations. Laboratory tests include alcohol content, residual sugar, acidity, and pH, checks for any artificial additives, among other indicators. Experienced tasters among the inspectors conduct on-site sensory evaluations. They assess the samples based on appearance, aroma, taste, finish, and style consistency. These third-party inspectors are sometimes jokingly called the Icewine police, making it a rigorous test for Canadian ice wine producers. Additionally, regulations require that all VQA Icewine members attend the annual VQA Icewine Standards Conference. This system is not just a formality for labeling. It is essentially a quality endorsement for the entire production process, and a key reason why Canadian ice wine commands strong credibility in the international market. So next time you see that small VQA logo on a bottle, don't underestimate it. It represents an entire rigorous system of quality assurance and the pride that Canadians take in their ice wine. If you enjoyed this program, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Hello everyone! Welcome to the Ice Wine Knowledge class. In our last episode, we introduced the VQA, the Wine Quality Alliance of Canada, and the strict standards it is set to ensure the healthy development of ice wine. These rigorous guidelines safeguard the quality of every bottle and give Canadian ice wine strong credibility on the international stage. This episode, we're diving into a sea of knowledge to explore how growers here cultivate and harvest the grapes used to make ice wine. We'll also uncover the scientific principles behind this magical, intensely sweet ice wine grape juice. Class begins now. Part 4. Growing grapes for ice wine. Number 1. The star grapes of ice wine. Ice wine is so exquisite and precious, but can just any grape be used to make it? Today, let's take a closer look at what kinds of grapes qualify as the true stars of the ice wine world, and what special characteristics they must have. The first characteristic of ice wine grapes is their aromatic profile. Ice wine is renowned for its rich, fruity aroma, so the grape variety must naturally possess strong aromatic qualities. These aromas need to remain and even intensify after the freezing and concentration process. As Carl Kaiser once said, the grapes must have aromatic characteristics because without layers of aroma, a sweet wine is nothing more than sugar water. The freezing process of the grape juice concentrates the aroma-active compounds such as esters and aldehydes. These aromatic traits preserved in the high-sugar environment give ice wine its complexity and distinct character, preventing it from tasting overly sweet or one-dimensional. Among the grape varieties that have strong aromatic qualities and are suitable for ice wine, Vidal features rich and long-lasting tropical fruit aromas, including lychee, mango, and dried apricot. Riesling gives off delicate and elegant aromas of citrus, honey, and minerals. Meanwhile, Cabernet Franc, one of the few red ice wine varieties, offers fresh, fruity notes of strawberry and rhubarb. The second key characteristic of ice wine grapes is high acidity. Ideal ice wine grapes must have naturally high acidity to balance the intense sugar concentration, creating a refreshing taste. Finished ice wine typically contains 190 to 220 grams of residual sugar per liter, while the titratable acidity needs to reach 10 to 13 grams per liter. By comparison, regular wines usually only require 5 to 7 grams of titratable acidity per liter. High acidity ensures that ice wine doesn't taste overly sweet, and it also extends its aging potential. For example, an outstanding Riesling ice wine can age for more than 50 years. Among grapes suitable for ice wine, Riesling has the sharpest acidity with the lowest pH, giving the wine a solid and well-defined structure. Vidal has slightly lower acidity than Riesling, but it is still enough to balance the sweetness. Its malic acid content is relatively high, making up about 84%, which gives a refreshing sensation. Cabernet Franc has lower acidity compared to the other two varieties, but among red grapes, it is still considered relatively high in acidity. The third key characteristic of ice wine grapes is late ripening. Ice wine grapes must be late ripening varieties, allowing them to mature slowly through the autumn and remain on the vine into winter to undergo natural freezing. As mentioned earlier, ice wine harvest takes place after November 15th, usually starting between December and January. Late ripening ensures that grapes experience multiple freeze-thaw cycles before harvest, enhancing the complexity of their flavors. This characteristic also extends the time the grapes remain on the vine, allowing them to wait for sufficiently low temperatures without falling off prematurely. Late ripening grape varieties include Vidal and Riesling. They have a slow and steady maturation cycle, allowing them to remain on the vine through winter without falling off, making them well suited for a long growing season in cool climates. The fourth key characteristic of Icewine grapes is thick skins and sturdy stems. Because they are late ripening, Icewine grapes need thick skins and strong stems to remain intact during the cold, windy and snowy winter conditions, preventing them from falling off or rotting. The thick skins and exceptionally strong attachment of the grapes to the stem allow them to hang on the vines deep into winter, braving frost, ice, and hungry birds. This remarkable natural toughness greatly reduces losses before harvest, ensuring that only the healthiest, most concentrated berries make it to the press step for Icewine. Among the grape varieties ideal for Icewine production, Vidal stands out with its exceptionally tough skin and strong attachment to the vine, offering excellent resistance to freezing temperatures and physical damage. Cabernet Franc, among red varieties, has notably thick skins, making it particularly well suited for crafting red Icewine. In comparison, Riesling has relatively thinner skins than the other two. Therefore, in the late growing season, it requires extra care, such as precisely timing the harvest and implementing special anti-frost and bird protection measures to ensure the grapes reach perfect condition for Icewine pressing. Another characteristic of Icewine grapes is their exceptional disease resistance. These varieties must possess strong natural defenses, particularly against noble rot, also called botrytis cinerea, and mold caused by winter humidity and damp conditions. Grapes infected with noble rot, which is perfect for crafting another legendary sweet wine, are entirely unsuitable for Icewine. Noble rot causes the berries to shrivel and fall prematurely, reduces juice yield dramatically, and fundamentally alters the flavor profile. Icewine, however, celebrates pure, unmasked varietal character. The presence of botrytis would overshadow and distort that pristine, vibrant fruit expression we seek. Strong disease resistance helps the grapes stay healthy through the damp fall and winter seasons, preventing any unnecessary interference with their natural flavors. Among grape varieties, Vidal has thick skins and strong disease resistance, with a very low rate of noble rot infection. Uniquely, even when about 10% to 15% of the grapes are infected, it can still be used to make Icewine, although this is not ideal. Riesling, on the other hand, has thinner skins and requires more careful vineyard management, but its overall disease resistance is still considered acceptable. The sixth characteristic of Icewine grapes is their cold hardiness. Although cold hardiness is somewhat related to late ripening, which we discussed earlier, the two traits are not exactly the same. Icewine grapes and their vines must be able to withstand extremely low temperatures from -8 to -14 degrees Celsius, or even lower, without suffering frost damage or falling off the vines too early. Cold winter temperatures are one of the major limiting factors in grape growing. Only cold-hardy varieties can survive long enough to reach harvest. Their cold hardiness ensures that the grapes remain viable even as they freeze on the vine, allowing them to yield high-quality juice. The seventh characteristic of Icewine grapes is their moderate sugar levels. Although Icewine is famous for its high residual sugar and its rich sweetness, the grapes used to make Icewine should not have excessively high sugar levels at harvest. The sweetness must come from natural concentration during freezing, rather than from an already high initial sugar content. Because the sugar content of the grapes in the fall does not determine the sugar level of the final Icewine juice. Their sweetness is shaped mainly by the freezing process. However, if the grapes start with excessively high sugar, as in the case of botrytized grapes, the freezing effect becomes weaker. This not only reduces yield, but can also negatively affect the flavor. Bastardized grapes rely on human intervention to induce noble rot and dehydrate the berries, while Icewine grapes are concentrated purely through natural freezing. These are two completely different styles of grapes. Having moderate sugar levels allows the freezing process to work more effectively and helps maintain a balanced interplay of sweetness and acidity. Vidal grapes typically reach about 20 brix at full ripeness, but after freezing, their sugar concentration can rise to 39 to 44 brix. Riesling starts with slightly lower initial sugar levels, yet after freezing and concentration, it achieves an excellent balance of sweetness and acidity. These sugar levels make both varieties exceptionally well suited for producing high-quality ice wine. In summary, the star grape varieties for ice wine that fully or mostly meet these 7 characteristics are Vidal, Riesling, and Cabernet Franc. These are the most common and popular ice wine grapes you'll find on the market. Now that we understand the key characteristics of grapes suited for ice wine, let's explore how ice wine juice is actually formed. Why does wine made from frozen grapes taste so rich and sweet? Is it a gift of nature or the reward of careful cultivation? And what is the science behind it? Number 2, the scientific theory of ice wine juice formation, the truth behind the miracle. The formation of ice within the grapes is the core process of ice wine production. As the temperature of the grape juice gradually drops, microscopic reactions within the cells take place, contributing to this phenomenon. Mature grapes undergo repeated freezing and thawing during winter, which dehydrates them. This unique process concentrates the sugars, acids, and aromatic compounds in the grapes, enhancing the richness of ice wine's flavor and giving it remarkable complexity. Let's take a closer look at how ice wine juice is formed and the science behind it. First, the lowering of the freezing point. Grape juice is not pure water. It is an aqueous solution containing sugars, fruit acids, and trace solutes. The sugars, mainly glucose and fructose, make up 18% to 24% of the juice. The fruit acids, primarily tartaric and malic acid, account for 0.8% to 1.2%. Trace elements include amino acids and minerals. The presence of these solutes lowers the freezing point of water, so grape juice does not freeze at 0 degrees Celsius, but requires a much lower temperature around -7 to -8 degrees Celsius to start forming ice. It's similar to how seawater behaves. While pure water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius at sea level, seawater does not freeze at this temperature because the dissolved salts lower its freezing point. In winter, we also take advantage of this phenomenon when we spread salt on roads or sidewalks to melt ice. The second principle is selective freezing. When the temperature drops to -8 degrees Celsius or lower, the water in the grape juice begins to crystallize into ice. Sugars, acids, and other solutes, which are more soluble, do not freeze and instead become concentrated in the remaining liquid juice. This selective freezing is what gives ice wine its high sugar content and intense flavors. But why are the incredible aroma and flavor molecules of ice wine not trapped in the ice crystals, and instead remain in the highly concentrated juice? When water molecules crystallize into ice at low temperatures, they form an orderly hexagonal lattice through hydrogen bonding known as the IH structure. This lattice is highly regular and tightly packed, and it can only accommodate water molecules. Larger molecules, such as sugars like glucose and fructose, and organic acids like tartaric and malic acid, are too big and structurally complex to fit into the ice crystal lattice. This also explains why sugars and acids are far more soluble in water than in ice. As more ice crystals form, the volume of liquid decreases, and the concentration of solutes gradually rises. This dynamic process further prevents solutes from entering the ice crystals because a more concentrated liquid is harder to freeze, and its freezing point continues to drop. As a result, to continue freezing the grapes, even lower temperatures are required, which leads to a continuous concentration effect. For example, at -9 degrees Celsius, the sugar concentration of the juice can reach 39 brix. And at minus 10.5 degrees, it can rise to 44 brix. Although even lower temperatures can produce higher sugar levels, the yield becomes extremely low and overly sweet grape juice is almost impossible to ferment. Eventually, when temperatures drop below minus 14 degrees Celsius, no juice can be extracted at all, because even the sugars and organic acids have crystallized into solids. Karl Kaiser of Inniskillen once tried pressing grapes at minus 17 degrees Celsius. He could barely extract any juice, and the extreme pressure even damaged 2 of his presses. Simply put, ice is like a picky diner. It only wants pure water. When water molecules freeze, they line up neatly in an orderly structure. Sugars and acids are too large and complex to fit, like trying to squeeze a big block through a small door. They remain in the liquid, and as more water freezes, the remaining liquid shrinks. The sugars and acids become more concentrated, and their levels continue to rise. Third, ice crystal formation and cell damage. When the temperature drops below the freezing point of grape juice, water first begins to freeze in the spaces between the cells. Because these areas have lower solute concentrations and a higher freezing point, making them easier to freeze. As the intercellular water freezes, the concentration of water in the remaining liquid decreases, and water inside the cells is drawn out due to osmotic pressure differences, causing further dehydration and increased shrinkage of the cells. We all know that ice is less dense than water. If ice were to form first inside the cells, the frozen grapes wouldn't just shrivel, they would burst. It's like leaving a bottle of water in the freezer overnight. We all know what happens. The ice crystals that form in the spaces between cells do not immediately kill the cells. As temperatures drop further, for example to minus 10 to minus 14 degrees Celsius, water inside the cells also begins to freeze, forming much smaller ice crystals. These ice crystals form within the cytoplasm or cell sap, often in needle-like or branched shapes, directly piercing the cell membranes and walls, causing irreversible damage to the cells. The piercing of cells by ice crystals is a key reason ice wine develops its distinctive sensory flavors and characteristics. When frozen grapes are pressed, the internal ice crystals cause the cells to rupture and even pierce the grape skins, whether breaking the cell membranes inside the grapes or puncturing the skins. This process helps release the juice and liberate the flavor compounds, enhancing the wine's complexity. For example, ruptured cells release sugars, acids, and aromatic compounds such as esters and thiols. During ice wine production, winemakers take advantage of this phenomenon. The contribution of ice crystals is especially noticeable when making ice wine from red grape varieties such as Cabernet Franc. Most red grape varieties have clear, colorless juice because the pigments and anthocyanins are found only in the skins. When making red wine, the grape skins are fermented together with the juice at relatively high temperatures, around 25 to 33 degrees Celsius. This allows the extraction of color and the flavor compounds from the skins. However, during ice wine production, this usually does not happen. The grapes are frozen and must be pressed to extract the juice before fermentation. As a result, winemakers rely on the ice crystals to help release color from the grape skins. Fourth, the characteristic of natural freezing. Ice wine requires the grapes to freeze naturally on the vine rather than being frozen artificially. This natural process introduces temperature fluctuations, creating freeze-thaw cycles. Grapes experience day-to-night temperature differences, for example, minus 4 to 5 degrees Celsius during the day and minus 10 to 12 degrees at night. This repeated formation and partial melting of ice crystals leads to more uniform cell rupture, releasing a wider variety of flavor compounds and enhancing the complexity of the wine. In the Niagara region, the ideal harvest window is from mid-December to mid-January. By this time, the grapes have undergone at least one freeze-thaw cycle, which helps develop more complex flavors. Artificial freezing, on the other hand, maintains a constant temperature and lacks this layered dynamic, making it impossible to replicate the natural complexity. In our next episode, we'll take you into the vineyards, venturing into the cold winter nights for a sweet adventure. You'll see how the grape growers and winemakers harvest and press the grapes, and how they protect them from frost and birds, all in the pursuit of producing high-quality ice wine. If you enjoyed our program, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Hello everyone! Welcome to the Icewine Knowledge class. In our previous episode, we introduced several star grape varieties perfect for crafting ice wine and explored the science behind how this unique frozen nectar is formed. In this episode, we're taking you straight into the vineyard, into the cold winter night, for a sweet adventure among the frosted vines. We'll take a closer look at how growers and winemakers work through the freezing night to craft premium ice wine, from harvesting and pressing the grapes, to protecting them from frost and hungry birds. So, let's begin our journey. Number 3. Harvesting ice wine grapes. A sweet adventure in the winter night. Ice wine is often called the liquid gold of the wine world. Its unique sweetness and elegant flavors all hinge on one crucial step: the harvest. Unlike regular wine grapes, ice wine grapes are not picked during the crisp, sunny days of autumn. They are harvested in the freezing, bitter nights of winter. It is below -8°C and normally even lower. This is not just a battle against nature. It's a high-stakes, sweet adventure. Today, we will talk about the harvest of ice wine grapes. We'll see how these tiny, frozen grapes hard as ice are transformed into a luxurious, exquisite wine. As we mentioned earlier, the Canadian VQA regulations require that grapes can only be harvested after November 15th, and the temperature must be below -8°C to be considered suitable. Once the temperature drops to -8°C or lower, after November 15th, the ice wine harvest officially begins. Each year after November 15th, winemakers must watch the weather forecast closely, looking for the perfect cold snap night to start the harvest. Timing is critical. Harvesting too early won't work. For example, if there's an early coldness, right after November 15th, the grapes may have a higher yield. However, at this stage, the grapes haven't yet undergone the significant physical and chemical changes that occur while hanging on the vine through repeated cycles of freezing and thawing. The process we discussed earlier. As a result, ice wine made from these early picked grapes lacks the complexity and depth of flavor found in ice wine made from grapes harvested later, like in December or next year January. At each winery, the winemaker monitors the local weather forecast and considers the flavor profile they want for their ice wine. They wait for even colder temperatures before starting the harvest. The lower the temperature, the higher the concentration of extracts in the wine, resulting in richer flavors and more intense aromas. But if they wait too long and encounter a warm weather in the winter or in an early spring, there may be no opportunity to reach -8°C, which poses a significant risk. Due to natural variations, some years see extremely late harvests. For example, during El Niño years, like 1998 or 2001, warmer than usual winters prevented temperatures from dropping to -8°C or lower. When the harvest is pushed into February or March, the grapes are usually severely dehydrated. Many of the fruits have been lost due to heavy rainfall or eaten by wildlife such as birds, deer, wolves, or bears. At this point, the juice yield from the harvest is very low. Ice wine grapes are usually harvested late at night or in the early hours before dawn, when temperatures are at their lowest. Workers bundle up in thick clothing and gloves, beginning their tasks in vineyards at temperatures well below -8°C. The frozen grapes are carefully picked by hand, cluster by cluster, and placed into harvest bins. Hand harvesting allows for precise selection of fully frozen grapes, while minimizing damage to the fruit. Hand harvesting is also not limited by terrain, making it ideal for steep slopes or small vineyards. In the small vineyards around the Niagara Escarpment, hand picking is the common option. The downside is obvious: it's extremely cold work. Additionally, juice from hand-picked grapes may contain more impurities, such as broken leaves and stems, requiring extra clarification steps. Nowadays, mechanical harvesting is becoming increasingly common, especially in large vineyards with flat terrain. Mechanical harvesters shake the vines, allowing the frozen grapes to fall through a grid. At temperatures below -8°C, the grapes pass through the grid like marbles, cleanly and efficiently. The advantages of mechanical harvesting are speed and precision. allowing winemakers to harvest the grapes within a short, low-temperature window. Frozen grapes harvested mechanically can provide clearer juice, with lower levels of insoluble solids. This is because the harvester's air-blowing system removes fallen leaves and broken stems, reducing impurities in the juice. This makes clarification and fermentation much easier, resulting in a cleaner, purer finished wine. Of course, the biggest advantage is labor savings. There's no need for large numbers of workers to toil through the freezing winter nights at well below -8 degrees Celsius. However, mechanical harvesting also has its downsides. Around 10% of the grapes fall to the ground, becoming a snack for the local birds. Number 4. Pressing the ice wine juice. Another crucial step in ice wine production is extracting the sweetest, most concentrated juice. The frozen grapes are pressed in extremely cold conditions, usually directly in the vineyard, to ensure they do not thaw. The grapes are pressed while still naturally frozen. During pressing, most of the water in the grapes remains frozen, and only a small amount of sweet, concentrated juice slowly flows from each grape. If the grapes warm up during pressing, the juice becomes diluted, which negatively affects the quality of the ice wine. That's why sugar levels must be carefully monitored to ensure the highest quality. During pressing, winemakers continuously track both the pressing temperature and the sugar content of the juice in real time, stopping the press immediately as soon as the juice begins to dilute. This dilution occurs because the friction generated during pressing melts part of the frozen grapes. Almost any press that can provide sufficient pressure can be used to press frozen grapes. However, the type of press used can influence the quality of the juice. Wineries typically use two types of presses. One is the horizontal pneumatic press. This press uses an inflatable bladder that runs along the central axis of the press. When the press is loaded with grapes, the inflatable bladder is collapsed, hugging the central shaft. When pressing begins, the bladder inflates inside the basket, pushing the grapes against the perforated walls to extract the juice. Although this type of press is powerful and efficient, it tends to produce a dirtier juice, containing more sediment. The Blaufelder press, which has no moving parts, produces much cleaner juice. This traditional press is lightweight and portable, allowing it to be used directly in the vineyard, and it remains a favorite among most wineries to this day. Number 5. Protecting against birds. The battle to defend ice wine grapes. In the Niagara region, birds are the biggest threat to ice wine grapes. From early December until Christmas, in Ontario, the main birds preying on ice wine grapes are starlings. These birds have relatively small appetites and generally do not favor grapes, especially the sweet, frozen ones. They prefer seeds and insects as their food. That's why during the regular grape harvest in autumn, whether for table grapes or wine production, birds are rarely a concern for growers. However, Canada's long, cold winters deprive birds of their preferred food sources, forcing them to look for alternatives. At this time, the grapes become highly attractive. In the later part of winter, with almost no other food available, flocks of starlings can quickly consume entire sections of a vineyard. To protect the precious ice wine grapes, protective nets have become a must for every winery. When we visit ice wine estates, every vineyard we see is covered with these protective nets. The nets must be long enough to secure under the grapevine canopy, preventing birds from entering the grape area from below. The size of the mesh is also an important factor in protecting the grapes. Since a significant portion of Ontario's vineyards now use mechanical harvesting, the mesh must be large enough to allow the grapes to fall through. At the same time, the openings must be small enough to prevent snow from accumulating on top of the vineyard nets, because birds could stand on the snow and peck at the grapes through the mesh. The ideal mesh size is 2.5 centimeters square. Next to some wineries, we also saw leftover malt from the beer brewing process after mashing. This is a favorite treat for small birds. Ontario has a thriving craft beer industry, with nearly every region having its own microbrewery. This inspired a rather interesting reverse idea. Rather than completely preventing birds from foraging, it's better to provide them with alternative food sources during winter. This way, the grapes are protected, and the birds are helped to survive the cold season. Malted barley left over from brewing can be placed outdoors in winter, in sheltered spots near the vineyard, or close to trees and shrubs, giving the birds a sense of safety so they can enjoy their meal with confidence. At the same time, this prevents snow from covering the grapes, completing a sustainable, natural food chain cycle. Number 6. Protecting against frost. keeping the vines warm through the winter chill. In the Niagara Peninsula, although the lake effect prevents extremely harsh winters from occurring frequently, low winter temperatures can still damage the vines. In particular, once temperatures drop below -20 degrees Celsius, the vines are vulnerable to frost damage. To ensure the vines survive the winter safely and maintain their yield, winemakers and growers take various frost protection measures. These techniques are not just for grapes used to make ice wine in Canada's cold climate. They are essential skills for growing all types of grapes. So, what frost protection methods do winemakers use? And what is the science behind them? The most commonly used technique is the wind machine. On clear and calm nights, heat from the ground radiates away into the sky. This creates a temperature inversion, where the temperature at the ground level is lower than at a certain height above. As a result, heat is lost from the ground upward into the sky, especially on clear nights. Vineyards or fields that no longer receive sunlight emit more heat than they absorb. This increases the temperature difference between the ground and the air above, causing temperatures to drop rapidly. On cold winter nights, growers use wind machines to circulate warmer air from above, raising the temperature around the plants and preventing self-freezing and winter damage. Another way to protect vines from the cold is rootstock management. Rootstock management is a highly practical technique in North American viticulture, and it is especially important in cold climate regions like Niagara. Simply put, rootstock management means giving the grapevine a reliable base. This base, the part near the root, is called the rootstock. Most classic European grape varieties, such as Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Pinot Noir, and Riesling, collectively known as Vitis vinifera, have very weak resistance to cold. They are also highly susceptible to damage from an insect called Phylloxera vastatrix. In other words, these varieties are susceptible to freezing temperatures or pet infections. This insect also originates from North America, and because of that, the native North American grape species, Vitis riparia and Vitis rupestris, are naturally very resistant to both cold temperatures and phylloxera. They're often called little cold-resistant powerhouses and natural shields against phylloxera. These hardy vines can even survive extreme winters down to -40 degrees Celsius. But there's a catch. Their berries are small, bitter, and highly astringent, so they're not suitable for making quality wine. But smart growers found a solution. They began grafting classic European grape varieties onto these hardy North American rootstocks. These rootstock heroes give the vine a solid foundation, helping it stand strong, resist the cold, fight off phylloxera, and adapt to different soils and climates. With these rootstocks, grapevines can survive frost, defeat phylloxera, and even thrive in sandy soils or heavy clay. And when it comes to ice wine, rootstock management becomes even more critical, because ice wine grapes are harvested deep in the winter. Growers must ensure the vines can withstand snow, ice, and prolonged low temperatures without being damaged. In Niagara, rootstock management isn't just a technical skill. It's the survival secret that helps ice wine grapes make it through the harsh winter. Another way to protect the vines from freezing is smart irrigation. In certain years, when winter temperatures drop dangerously low, or when early spring frost becomes a threat, growers don't rely on wind machines alone. They also use irrigation systems to help prevent frost damage. The principle behind irrigation frost protection is based on a thermodynamic property called latent heat of fusion. At 0 degrees Celsius, water can exist in both liquid and solid form at the same time. So as the water cools along with the surrounding ground, its temperature drops until it reaches 0 degrees Celsius. Then, as the water begins to freeze, it remains at 0 degrees Celsius and won't drop any further until all the water has solidified. Only after that will the temperature continue to fall, which means the surrounding environment may already be far below freezing. During the freezing process, water releases 79.72 calories per gram of heat. This is what we call the latent heat of fusion. This released heat helps keep the temperature of the vine and grape clusters around 0 degrees Celsius, so the core of the grapes does not freeze. As explained earlier, the main way cold damages plants is through the formation of ice crystals inside the plant cells. When the water around the cells starts to freeze, the water inside the cells is drawn out, and ice crystals continue to grow outside the cells. But this process only causes a temporary loss of water from the cells, and does not result in permanent damage. So, if temperatures are expected to drop below freezing for a short period, growers will spray water onto the vines to let it freeze. This creates a protective effect, keeping the grape clusters around 0 degrees Celsius, while the cores remain unfrozen. The protection can be extended by using sprinklers, allowing the outer layer of the grapes to exist simultaneously as liquid and solid. However, if temperatures drop well below freezing and remain low for an extended period, this strategy will no longer work. Eventually, all the water will freeze, and the plants themselves will be frozen. As the temperature continues to fall to match the environment, the grape clusters and vines can be damaged. At that point, growers must rely on wind machines or other methods to prevent frost damage. In the next episode, we'll take you from the vineyard into the winery to explore a crucial final step in ice wine production, the fermentation process. We'll dive into how, after the ice grapes are pressed, that sweet, concentrated juice is transformed into the golden liquid we know as ice wine. If you enjoyed our show, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Hello everyone. Welcome to the Icewine Knowledge class. Last episode, we took you into the frozen vineyards on a cold winter night, discovering how winemakers and growers work tirelessly under snow and ice to craft high-quality ice wine. In this episode, we're leaving the chilly vineyard behind and stepping into the warm fermentation room to explore how freshly pressed ice wine juice transforms into the sweet, luxurious wine we love. Part 5. How ice wine is fermented. From -8 degrees Celsius to liquid gold. First, let's talk about the extreme challenges faced by the fermentation yeast. Once those frozen grapes are pressed into sweet, concentrated juice, we enter a very important stage of production: fermentation. This is the crucial step where ice wine begins its transformation from concentrated grape juice into the golden liquid we know and love. Most ice wine juice has a Brix level between 37 and 42. And in some cases, it can reach as high as 55 Brix. That means the sugar concentration in the juice can be as high as 400 grams per liter. Although sugar is the food source for yeast, and we all know that alcohol is created when yeast consumes sugar and produces alcohol and carbon dioxide, this extremely high level of sugar creates an intense stress environment for ordinary yeast cells. It's essentially a sweet hell for them. The reason behind this is that the solutes in ice wine juice are extremely concentrated. Because of osmosis, yeast cells begin to lose water, as water molecules move from inside the yeast cells out into the juice. This causes the cells to shrink, and some of them even start to die. And that's because yeast can only function when there is enough water available. It's just like how grain or wood becomes moldy only when moisture is present. As a result, the entire fermentation process is extremely difficult and slow. To ensure that fermentation proceeds smoothly, winemakers use a large amount of yeast, and for some strains, they perform a process called rehydration. This means the yeast is first soaked in warm water, or diluted grape juice to wake them up, like giving them enough water before sending them to the front line. Because of this, the yeast strains used for ice wine are different from those used in regular wine. They must be able to withstand high osmotic pressure to achieve the best fermentation results. Fermentation temperature cannot be too cold or too hot. The ideal range for ice wine yeast is between 13 degrees Celsius and 25 degrees Celsius. As yeast consumes sugar to produce alcohol, it also secretes glycerol to protect itself from excessive water loss. The right amount of glycerol makes ice wine feel silky smooth, like velvet gliding across the tongue. This also contributes to the beautiful legs you see on ice wine in a glass. While the high sugar content helps, glycerol plays an important role too. At the same time that glycerol is produced, a byproduct called volatile acid, such as acetic acid, is formed. But this acidity isn't a problem. It actually helps balance the sweetness of the wine. Just like adding a touch of lemon to a donut. The fermentation process is extremely slow, taking anywhere from a few weeks to several months, until the alcohol content reaches 7% to 11%, while the residual sugar remains 190 to 220 grams per liter. Sweet, but never cloying. In Canada, ice wine must have an alcohol content of at least 7%, while in the European Union,
the minimum requirement is 4.5%. Many people wonder, if ice wine is so high in sugar, doesn't that mean it should also be very high in alcohol? On the contrary, ice wine's alcohol content is actually slightly lower than that of regular wine. This is because excessively high sugar levels can kill the yeast. Historically, before the invention of modern active yeast strains, most ice wines would have had very low alcohol levels, and often carried less than ideal flavors. This is because the natural yeast cells in grapes, Saccharomyces, cannot survive in such high sugar concentrations. Sometimes, ice wine juice can only ferment if it is luckily contaminated. That is, if yeast cells are accidentally introduced from equipment or the residues in oaked barrels, rather than coming from the native yeast on the ice wine grapes themselves. So we can say that the popularity of ice wine is the perfect combination of human ingenuity and nature's gift. Neither can do it alone. Next, let's talk about the acid adjustment in ice wine. The balance between sweetness and freshness. Although ice wine is naturally sweet and intensely flavorful due to its high sugar content, its sense of balance comes from acidity. A certain level of acidity gives ice wine a clean, refreshing finish. Without acidity, ice wine would be nothing more than sugar water. The acidity in ice wine juice mainly comes from malic acid and tartaric acid. Let's start with malic acid, the contributor to ice wine's refreshing character. Its name may remind you of apples, and its flavor really does have that crisp, green apple quality. With a tartness and a hint of youthful fruitiness during ice wine fermentation, most of the malic acid is retained, accounting for 67% to 93% of the total acidity. Because cold pressing removes much of the water, the concentrated malic acid gives the wine a sharper edge, cutting through the sweetness with a refreshing sensation. It prevents the wine from feeling cloying, almost like taking a crisp bite of a chilled green apple in winter. Next, let's look at tartaric acid, the big brother of ice wine's structure. Its flavor is softer, reminiscent of the natural acidity of ripe grapes, with subtle hints of lemon and white vinegar. Tartaric acid provides the backbone of ice wine, making the body more balanced, and giving it an elegant, restrained finish, so it doesn't feel overwhelmingly sweet. In most regular wines, especially reds, tartaric acid usually dominates the acidity. But in ice wine, when grapes freeze, much of the tartaric acid crystallizes and precipitates as tartrate, so its content is lower than malic acid. After analyzing hundreds of grape juice samples from Riesling, Vidal, and Cabernet Franc ice wines, we can draw some general conclusions from this comparison table. Riesling shows the brightest and most refreshing acidity, with the lowest pH level. Vidal ice wine usually has a similar acidity level to Riesling, but its pH value tends to be slightly higher. Cabernet Franc, on the other hand, generally presents lower acidity and a relatively higher pH. Its dominant acid is malic acid and very low tartaric acid level. According to European Union regulations, ice wine, like all premium quality wines, is not allowed to be acidified with tartaric acid. A small amount of citric acid may be added, but the total amount cannot exceed 1 gram per liter. Legally, this is considered a stabilization and antimicrobial treatment, rather than acidification. Because of this rule, ice wines produced in Germany and Austria often end up with lower acidity or a less balanced structure, especially when the pH level is high, which is quite common in varieties that naturally lack acidity, such as Cabernet Franc. For Riesling, acidification usually isn't necessary, except in rare or unusual vintages. In contrast, Canada's VQA system offers much greater flexibility. Here, winemakers are allowed to use a wider range of acids. Beyond citric acid, up to 4 grams per liter of total acidification is permitted. With this option, winemakers can fine-tune acidity and improve the overall balance of the ice wine. It gives Canadian winemakers the freedom to experiment, express their creativity, and work their magic. As a result, Canadian ice wine tends to offer greater stylistic diversity, with beautifully harmonious sweetness and acidity. Next, let's talk about the role of oak barrels in wine production. The transformations that occur during barrel aging are incredibly complex. In many ways, an oak barrel functions like a flavor factory. Most barrels are made from French oak, specifically Quercus robur, or from American white oak, known as Quercus alba. Within the wood, there are natural compounds that can contribute aromas of vanilla, coconut, caramel, and even subtle smoky notes. Different levels of toasting also give the wine very different characteristics. Lightly toasted barrels tend to express more delicate floral notes, while heavily toasted barrels can develop richer, smoky flavors. As the wine rests in the barrel for several months, the oak works like a master seasoning artist, slowly releasing aromatic compounds and tannins, layer by layer. Secondly, oak barrels allow the wine to breathe. The wood contains tiny pores, and through them, a small amount of oxygen can slowly work its way into the wine. During this gradual oxidation process, tannins and other compounds in the wine begin to react under this gentle micro-oxygenated environment created by the wood grain. We call this micro-oxygenation. Over time, this process softens the tannins, transforming the wine from sharp and astringent into something much smoother and silkier. However, when it comes to ice wine production, the use of oak barrels is actually quite limited. Oak aging is mostly applied to Vidal, helping build a richer structure and giving the wine a more distinctive character, one that has become closely associated with Canadian ice wine. Riesling, on the other hand, is a far more delicate and refined variety. Traditionally, it is fermented and aged in stainless steel tanks to preserve its purity, freshness, and elegant natural aromatics. Now, let's explore a very special style of ice wine, sparkling ice wine. Among all wine categories, sparkling wines are undoubtedly the ones that carry the strongest sense of celebration. And when we hear sparkling wine, most people immediately think of champagne from France. Whether it's the moment when the New Year countdown reaches zero, the champagne tower flowing at a wedding, or the joyful toasts at a summer garden party, sparkling wine always brings a feeling of lightness, excitement, and ritual. Sparkling ice wine relies on naturally produced carbon dioxide in the wine to create delicate bubbles. These fine bubbles bring a lively texture and a refreshing sense of layers on the palate. Just like traditional ice wine, sparkling ice wine can be paired with desserts or enjoyed on its own. It makes an ideal companion for afternoon tea or festive gatherings. And just imagine what kind of magic happens when these bubbles meet ice wine. 1998 was an exhilarating year for winemakers. The grapes grew in exceptional condition, reaching a perfect balance of ripeness and acidity. As Christmas approached, the cold snap arrived right on schedule. With temperatures dropping between -9 and -12 degrees Celsius, and lasting until mid-January 1999. This created a golden window for producing top-quality ice wine. It was in this very year that Enniskillen in Canada experienced an extraordinary ice wine grape harvest. Against this backdrop, a new experiment quietly began, crafting sparkling ice wine from these premium ice wine grapes. The traditional method for sparkling wines, like champagne, is a two-step fermentation process. First, the grape juice ferments into still wine. Then, yeast and sugar are added to the still wine to generate carbon dioxide bubbles. However, this method doesn't work well for ice wine, which has extremely high sugar levels and an alcohol content already around 9%. To overcome this, the winery turned to a single-step fermentation in a pressurized tank. The key to this method is that the entire fermentation process, from fresh grape juice to sparkling ice wine, is completed in one go. During the fermentation, the tank remains open until the alcohol content reaches about 9 to 9.5%. As fermentation enters its final stage and the alcohol rises to 10.5 to 11%, the tank is then sealed. This allows the carbon dioxide produced by the yeast during the last 1.5% increase in alcohol to be naturally trapped, creating the delicate bubbles. Finally, the wine must be aged for a period of time before it meets the strict standards of a high-quality sparkling ice wine. Therefore, the initial yeast used in sparkling ice wine must be highly active, capable of sustaining fermentation, up to 10.5 or 11% alcohol. This innovative approach eventually received VQA certification and was formally recognized under Canadian wine regulations. Since 1998, Enniskillen has been producing sparkling ice wine continuously, pioneering the creation of bubbles in ice wine. Tasting sparkling ice wine is a truly unique experience. Flavors of tropical fruits, ginger, pear, and lemon lime, unfold layer by layer within the fine, persistent bubbles. The finish is silky smooth, leaving a lingering elegance on the palate. This wine can cleverly balance the richness of desserts, such as bittersweet chocolate truffle cake. Thanks to the magic of the bubbles, the aroma becomes more complex, and the texture feels lively and dynamic. On a sun-drenched summer afternoon, imagine French toast soaked in vanilla-infused ice wine, paired with a glass of Vidal sparkling ice wine. It's elegant, light, and almost like a poem awakening the senses. The combination of ice wine and bubbles is not just a technical breakthrough in winemaking. It's a sublime experience for both taste and vision. Now that we've explored the journey of ice wine, from a single frozen grape to a golden liquid, in our next episode, we'll raise our glasses and truly indulge. Not only will we savor the exquisite flavors of ice wine, but we'll also embark on a culinary adventure, discovering how tasting ice wine can provide an unparalleled sensory experience. If you enjoy our program, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Icewine Knowledge class. In the past few episodes, we've explored the origins and history of ice wine, examined the unique climate and soil of the Niagara region, introduced the strict VQA standards, and looked deep into grape growing, harvesting, pressing, and fermentation. Together, we've learned how a single grape, from the moment it's planted, eventually becomes the golden liquid inside a bottle of ice wine. So, now the question is, why is ice wine so beloved around the world? Before we begin the real tasting, there's something small, yet often ignored, that we need to understand first. The wine glass. A glass plays a crucial role. It is the medium through which our senses of smell and taste perceive the wine's complexity and character. A well-designed glass can elevate the entire experience, creating moments of true enjoyment and memorable flavors. A wrong glass, however, does nothing more than deliver the liquid into your mouth. Part 1. The Flavor Magic of Ice Wine. Why a great wine deserves the right glass. You might be wondering, is a wine glass really that important? The answer is absolutely yes. A wine glass is not just a container. It is an amplifier for both aroma and flavor. The right glass allows you to perceive more fragrance, makes the acidity feel brighter, and lets the sweetness become rounder and smoother. But the wrong glass can make the very same wine taste flat, dull, or even unpleasant. If you want to test this for yourself, try pouring the same ice wine into 2 glasses of different shapes. Smell them, taste them. You'll be surprised at how different the wine can feel. So, how exactly does a wine glass influence the flavor of ice wine? Let's start by understanding the structure of a wine glass. A standard wine glass is made up of 4 main parts: the lip, the bowl, the stem, and the base. First, the lip, the part of the glass that touches your lips. The width of the opening determines how aromas are released, both in direction and in speed. Next, we look at the bowl, often called the ball of the glass. Its shape determines how much of the wine is exposed to air and affects the way the wine swirls inside the glass. The design of the bowl also shapes the path of evaporating aromas. Delicate floral and fruity notes rise toward the lip, while heavier aromas, like leather or oak, settle lower in the bowl. A well-designed glass allows these layers of aroma to unfold gradually and release in harmony. The third part is the stem. This is what allows us to hold the wine glass elegantly without touching the bowl itself. Why is this important? Because our hands carry heat, and direct contact with the bowl can warm the wine and alter its ideal serving temperature. This matters even more for white wines and sparkling wines, which are extremely sensitive to temperature. So, a well-designed stem isn't just about elegance, it helps preserve the wine at its best. Lastly, we have the base, which supports the entire structure of the glass. A well-designed base keeps the glass stable and secure on the table, and it also contributes to the overall balance and the way the glass feels in your hand. Now, let's talk about our sense of taste. One of the most widely circulated ideas is that different parts of the tongue are responsible for sensing the four basic tastes: sweetness, bitterness, acidity, and saltiness, although modern science has shown that this is not entirely accurate. And many researchers have questioned this model. It is still a concept familiar to many wine enthusiasts and often used as a reference when discussing wine tasting. 1. The tip of the tongue is most sensitive to sweetness, while the back of the tongue is the least sensitive to it. 2. The back of the tongue is most sensitive to bitterness, and the tip is the least sensitive. 3. Acidity is perceived most strongly along the middle edges of the tongue, and weakest at the very tip. 4. Saltiness is sensed relatively evenly across all parts of the tongue. In short, most of our taste receptors, those that perceive sweetness, acidity, saltiness, and bitterness, are concentrated on the tongue and the upper throat. Because of this, wine can present very different aromas and flavors when tasted from glasses of different shapes. Multiple factors come into play here. The movements and adjustments of our head and body while drinking are largely controlled subconsciously. The shape of the wine glass guides these natural motions, helping us tilt our head to the right position so we can drink comfortably without spilling. When the wine enters the mouth, it comes into contact with the taste receptors on the tongue and the palate, creating sensations of sweetness, saltiness, acidity, or bitterness. When the wine enters the mouth, it comes into contact with the taste receptors on the tongue and the palate, creating sensations of sweetness, saltiness, acidity, or bitterness. At the same time, volatile aromatic compounds rise through the mouth and nasal passages and reach the olfactory receptors located just beneath the eyes. These different scent signals, combined with taste, form our overall sensory experience of food and drink. In other words, when we eat or drink, we are not only tasting, we are also smelling. And this combination of taste and aroma is what we call flavor. The width of the lip influences how you move your head, which in turn changes the path the wine takes as it enters your mouth. A wide-lipped glass makes you lower your head as you sip. The wine flows from the tip of the tongue, passes through the center, and then goes down the throat, highlighting sweetness. More volatile aromas travel upward through the nasal passages, making bold aromas even more expressive. This type of glass suits wines that are full-bodied, aromatic, and low in acidity and sweetness, such as Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and other rich, heavy red wines. A narrow-rimmed glass, on the other hand, encourages you to tilt your head back. The wine then falls by gravity directly onto the center and sides of the tongue, balancing the sweetness detected at the tip with the acidity sensed along the edges. This style of glass works best for lighter-bodied wines, with a harmonious balance of acidity and sweetness, such as Icewines and Rieslings. Now, let's take a look at some of the major international wine glass styles and the types of wines they are designed for. 1. Burgundy glass. The Burgundy glass is one of the most widely used designs. It is created specifically for lighter-bodied, highly aromatic, high-acidity red wines, such as Pinot Noir and Gamay. Its most distinctive feature is the large, rounded bolafon, called a balloon shape. The bowl curves almost like a sphere, which helps concentrate the wine's aromas. When you swirl the glass, the aromas are quickly released and gather at the lip. Because Pinot Noir is a high-acidity red wine, the slightly shorter bowl and the inward tapered, almost triangular lip are intentional. They guide the wine into the mouth quickly and allow it to spread rapidly to the sides of the tongue, where acidity is most strongly perceived, helping the drinker fully appreciate the wine's brightness and structure. 2. Bordeaux glass. The Bordeaux glass is the most common style of red wine glass. It is ideal for full-bodied, tannin-rich red wines, such as Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, and Shiraz. Compared with the Burgundy glass, the Bordeaux glass has a narrower bowl and a taller body. This design is intentional. Full-bodied high-tannin wines, like Cabernet Sauvignon, need more contact with air. The extra vertical space at the top of the glass provides ample room for swirling, allowing the wine to interact with oxygen and helping to soften the tannins. In addition, the tall, straight shape of the glass guides the wine more quickly and evenly into the mouth, allowing the drinker to fully experience the power and structure of these robust red wines. 3. Chardonnay glass. The Chardonnay glass is similar in shape to the Bordeaux glass, but it is smaller in size. It doesn't provide as much headspace for the wine. This is because Chardonnay white wines and rose wines are usually lighter bodied and have more pronounced floral aromas. The smaller glass size helps reduce the contact between the wine and oxygen, allowing the floral aromas to linger longer. At the same time, this glass shape also reduces the distance between the wine and the lip of the glass, allowing the taster to smell the wine's aroma more quickly. 4. Port glass. The port glass is also called a dessert wine glass. It is suitable for various sweet wines, such as port wine, noble rot sweet wine, ice wine, and sherry. Considering that sweet wines have a high sugar content, are usually consumed after a meal, and are not drunk in large quantities, dessert wine glasses are much smaller than other types of wine glasses. Imagine at a wine party, if someone poured you 80 milliliters of ice wine in a 750 milliliters glass, you would definitely find it strange. The mouth of the port glass is also relatively narrow, which is more conducive to concentrating the aroma of the wine. The tapered design allows the drinker to tilt their head back, and the wine flows directly to the middle and sides of the tongue by gravity, allowing the drinker to directly experience the balance of sweetness and acidity in the sweet wine. 5. Flute glass. The flute glass is the classic choice for sparkling wines. Its long, slender shape and narrow bowl not only look elegant, but also let you clearly watch the steady stream of bubbles rising from the bottom of the glass. The narrow opening helps preserve those fine, persistent bubbles, keeping the wine lively and refreshing. A simple way to remember all these glasses for wines. Bold reds need a big bowl. High-acid wines shine in a narrow rim. Sweet wines work best in a smaller glass. And for champagne, the flute is the best. We've already introduced the port glass, a versatile glass often used for sweet wines, including ice wine. But thanks to the dedication of winemakers here in Ontario, Canada, Icewine eventually gained a glass designed just for itself. On October 18, 1999, the world-renowned glassmaker Riedel partnered with one of Canada's most iconic ice wine wineries, Enniskillen, to begin a very special experiment. They invited Icewine pioneer Donald Zeraldo, master winemaker Carl Kaiser, and Riedel's designer, Georg Riedel, to work together on creating the ultimate ice wine glass. 2 years later, their collaboration led to the birth of the Vinum Extreme Ice Wine Glass, the first glass ever crafted specifically for ice wine. Its introduction marked a new chapter for ice wine, a moment when this sweet, golden beverage stepped beyond tradition and entered a world where sensory science and aesthetic design come together. Of course, you can enjoy ice wine in a traditional port or sweet wine glass, but compared with port, noble, rot, or sherry, ice wine is celebrated for something quite different. Its intensely expressive aromatics and its signature balance of sweetness and bright acidity. To highlight this unique advantage, the Vinum Extreme Ice Wine Glass offers several distinctive features, designed specifically for ice wine, features that set it apart from ordinary dessert wine glasses. First, its size is slightly larger, including both the height and the volume of the bowl. Although ice wine is classified as a sweet wine, its aromas are incredibly complex. The slightly larger bowl of the Vinum Extreme glass helps these aromas open up and release more rapidly. Traditional dessert wine glasses often feature a more closed, tapered lip. This design gathers the rapidly unfolding aromas of ice wine, enhancing their layers and complexity, and helping prevent those delicate fragrances from dissipating too quickly. The lightest and most volatile aromas, typically the floral and fruity notes, rise to the middle layer, near the lip of the glass. Aromas with green, herbal tones, along with earthy and mineral elements, tend to settle slightly lower. The heaviest aromas, such as woody notes and alcohol, remain toward the bottom of the glass. A larger bowl allows the wine to move more freely when you swirl it. But unlike full-bodied red wines, where swirling helps soften tannins, swirling ice wine serves a different purpose. It weights a larger surface area of the glass, increasing evaporation and intensifying the release of its delicate aromas. Second, the slightly tapered lip, which we mentioned earlier, helps control the flow of the wine. It gently encourages the taster to tilt their head back, allowing the wine to fall directly, by gravity, onto the front of the tongue. This placement lets the sweetness at the tip of the tongue and the acidity along the sides reach a perfect balance. At the same time, the aromas enter the olfactory system from both the nose and the mouth, enhancing the overall sensory experience. Third, its lightweight crystal construction. Riedel uses high-quality, machine-blown crystal glass to create an exceptionally thin bowl and a precisely cut lip. This gives the drinker a more refined tactile sensation and ensures nothing interferes with how delicately the wine is perceived in the mouth. The thin crystal also elevates the overall visual elegance of the glass. We hope today's episode helps you feel more confident in choosing the right glass for any wine you enjoy, whether it's a classic table wine or a beautiful ice wine. By understanding how different glasses work with different styles of wine, you can select the one that best matches your preferences and fully appreciate everything a great wine has to offer. May your wine glass become not just a vessel, but a tool that allows each wine to reveal its true charm. In our next class, we'll raise our glasses and truly enjoy the beauty of ice wine. We'll also begin a delicious culinary journey to explore how ice wine pairs with different foods and how to bring out its best in every sip. If you enjoyed this program, please subscribe, like, and leave us a comment. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you in the next class.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Icewine Knowledge class. In the previous episode, we explored the importance of wine glasses in wine tasting and learned how to choose the right glass based on a wine's character, including the proper glass specifically designed for ice wine. In this episode, we invite you to truly taste the magic of ice wine and discover how it pairs with a wide variety of foods. We'll take a deeper look at how to enjoy ice wine properly and uncover the secrets behind tasting it with insight and appreciation. Part 6. Ice Wine Tasting. Unlocking the flavor code of sweetness, acidity, and aroma. First, let's talk about the crucial role temperature plays in ice wine tasting. While the shape of the wine glass is important, if the wine is not served at the proper temperature, the glass cannot fully perform its function. This principle applies to all wines. So here is the answer up front. The ideal serving temperature for ice wine is 10 to 12 degrees Celsius. According to research by Riedel, the higher the temperature, the stronger people perceive the sweetness of sucrose. This effect is most pronounced at lower concentrations of sucrose. When the temperature increases from 4 degrees Celsius to 36 degrees Celsius, a low-concentration sucrose solution, equivalent to the amount of sugar in 2 teaspoons added to a cup of coffee, shows a 92% increase in perceived sweetness, meaning the sweetness is almost doubled. A preference for sweetness is shared by almost all mammals. From a biological perspective, glucose is the most important sugar molecule. It is the primary energy source for the human body, and the only energy source the human brain can directly utilize. This may help explain people's strong preference for ice wine. When the temperature is too low, it not only locks in the wine's aromas, preventing tropical fruit and honey notes from fully expressing themselves, but also affects the palate. The wine may taste less sweet and even more astringent. On the other hand, if the temperature is too high, alcohol volatility increases, leading to more pronounced alcoholic aromas. At the same time, certain heavier, higher molecular weight compounds, such as vanillin, can become overly volatile, creating aromas that feel unbalanced or unpleasant. Excessive warmth also causes aromas to dissipate too quickly. The wine may appear overly sweet and cloying, with sweetness dominating everything else, causing the wine to lose the freshness and balance it is meant to have. Typically, ice wine is best enjoyed at 10 to 12 degrees Celsius. At this temperature, fruit aromas, floral notes, and honeyed nuances unfold in harmony, creating rich and layered complexity. On the palate, The wine shows a beautiful balance of sweetness and acidity, fresh and vibrant, with a long, lingering finish. That said, the ideal serving temperature can be slightly adjusted depending on the style of the ice wine, personal preference, and food pairing. If you prefer a sweeter, rounder mouthfeel, you can raise the temperature slightly. If you enjoy a brighter acidity and a more refreshing profile, serving it a little cooler will highlight that character. When we talk about a fine wine, we can never separate it from food. So when we truly savor a glass of ice wine, what kind of dishes can make our taste buds enjoy it even more? Ice wine is often regarded as a sweet finale, enjoyed after a meal and paired with dessert. But in the eyes of the late former resident chef of Enniskillen Winery, Isabella Calabas, ice wine is far more than that. With her sharp palate and rich imagination, she opened up limitless possibilities for pairing ice wine with cuisine, revealing a whole new world where ice wine and food come together in unexpected harmony. In this chapter, let us follow in her footsteps into the world of ice wine at the table, and discover how it transforms from a desert companion into the soulful partner of refined appetizers, or the finishing touch that elevates a main course. Ice wine is not only meant to be sipped, it is also meant to be tasted. In this chapter, we pay tribute to this culinary artist who bravely fought against illness and carried forward the precious legacy she left behind. The creative and inspired pairing of ice wine and food. In Niagara, Canada, one of the world's most renowned ice wine regions, autumn is the perfect season to experience ice wine. This is when autumn fruits and ice wine come together in natural harmony. And it's also the time of year when our appetites awaken and we crave fresh, vibrant flavors. Niagara's unique climate and geography shape not only the grapes used for winemaking, but also the fruits and vegetables grown throughout the region. Pairing ice wine with locally sourced, seasonal ingredients carries a deep sense of pride in agricultural tradition. That is why perfectly ripe, in-season fruits, such as peaches, grapes, apricots, or pears, are always among the best companions for locally produced wines. For example, when Niagara's iconic peaches reach full ripeness, they burst with rich, luscious sweetness, yet retain a lively acidity that keeps the palate fresh and vibrant. Ice wine made from grapes grown in neighboring vineyards shows a remarkably similar balance of sweetness and acidity. The two come together seamlessly complementing one another without ever competing. With its luxurious sweetness and intense aromatic expression, ice wine is defined by a remarkable balance between sugar and acidity. This harmony, combined with beautifully ripe fruit character, gives ice wine an exceptional sense of elegance, making it one of the least cloying of all sweet wines and allowing it to pair effortlessly with a far wider range of foods. From the very first sip, the palate reveals remarkable layers of flavor. It begins with notes of nectarine, apricot, and pineapple, followed by the rich depth of lychee and honey. No other wine comes so close to the pure expression of dark honey, yet without the heavy, cloying sweetness often associated with honey itself. This is why ice wine needs no adjustment period. It is a wine that people fall in love with instantly. Perhaps because of its high price, ice wine is often thought to belong only with refined and luxurious dishes. In reality, ice wine is one of the most versatile wines in the world. It can be enjoyed as a dessert wine after a meal, served as an aperitif alongside appetizers, paired with main courses, or even used as an ingredient in cooking, contributing depth and sweetness to a dish. It can also stand on its own, simply enjoyed as a dessert in itself. Vidal grapes are the most iconic variety for Canadian ice wine. Their flavor profile is defined by intense notes of apricot and pineapple, accompanied by a distinctive aroma reminiscent of dark honey, lingering gracefully through a long, elegant finish. These flavors pair beautifully with fresh, locally sourced ingredients, making Vidal ice wine an ideal match for a wide range of fruit-based desserts, such as summer berries with chilled ice wine cream, peaches with raspberry ice wine puree, an apple grape tart with ice wine crust. Vidal's subtle notes of fig and candied orange peel bring a rich, silky texture to the palate, making it an exceptional pairing for foie gras with green apple and blackcurrant jam. Oak-aged Vidal ice wine develops notes of almond, vanilla, and warm toasted bread, giving it greater depth and complexity than unoaked styles. and opening up even more possibilities for food pairing. For example, it pairs beautifully with Basque pear mousse, served with chocolate biscuits and caramel sauce. Oak aging not only highlights the biscuit-like flavors, but also adds an earthy, caramel-tinged finish to the wine. In addition, oak-aged Vidal Icewine enhances roasted and baked characteristics, making it an excellent match for grilled or roasted dishes such as Icewine marinated pork medallions with corn-crusted onion rings. Icewine, made from the noble Riesling grape, best preserves its bright acidity and mineral-driven character, accompanied by expressive aromas of orange peel and citrus fruits. This elegant style of sweet wine is especially well-suited to luxurious dishes, such as seared foie gras, dark chocolate, creme brulee, or silky cream-based sauces. The vibrant acidity of Icewine cuts through richness and fat, creating a completely new and beautifully balanced tasting experience. The distinctive deep ruby-colored Cabernet Franc Icewine is filled with flavors of candied red berries, such as strawberry, cherry, and rhubarb. Cabernet Franc Icewine often shows a subtle savory saline note, balanced by the fresh sweet tart character of red berries. This makes it a beautiful match for cherry and white chocolate mousse layered in a hazelnut pastry, or for something wonderfully simple. Drunken strawberries, where fresh strawberries are gently macerated in Cabernet Franc Icewine. Icewine and chocolate are truly soulmates. Chocolate may be the only food capable of matching Icewine in both complexity and depth. The many layers of chocolate, from fruit and nut notes to earthy, tobacco, floral, and vanilla nuances, create a rich dialogue with the fruit, floral, and vanilla aromas found in Icewine. Rich milk chocolate brings out the wine's vanilla character, while the deep, layered texture of a bittersweet chocolate Icewine truffle cake harmonizes beautifully with Icewine's silky mouthfeel. As a dessert wine, Icewine carries enough acidity to balance sweetness, allowing even the most intense chocolate desserts to feel rich yet refined, indulgent yet elegant. Icewine's full, generous sweetness also creates a beautiful contrast with savory dishes. A classic example is the pairing of oak-aged Icewine with foie gras. The rich, luxurious texture of foie gras complements the wine's layered complexity, while the caramelization from searing echoes the flavors developed through oak aging. Icewine often shows pronounced aromas of lychee, peach, candied apricot, and ginger, flavors that instantly evoke cravings for Asian cuisine, such as succulent duck dishes with rich, gelatinous textures. This may help explain why Icewine holds such a special appeal for Asian palates. Enjoying a glass of Icewine before dinner as an aperitif is a wonderful choice, especially when paired with a few savory bites to gently stimulate the appetite. You can even save half a bottle to enjoy after the meal, with or without dessert. A classic pre-dinner pairing is sparkling Icewine with truffled cauliflower cream soup, a refined way to begin a meal. Watch how the bubbles soften the soup's rich, creamy texture, while elegant flavors dance gracefully across the palate. After dinner, dessert is not always necessary, because Icewine itself can be the dessert, with its naturally concentrated fruit sugars, balanced by vibrant acidity. It resembles liquid fruit nectar, and is more than enough to bring a meal to a beautiful close. Icewine and cheese make a truly stunning pairing, especially with bold, full-flavored cheeses. These include blue cheeses such as Roquefort and Gorgonzola, hard-aged cheeses like Parmigiano Reggiano and aged Gruyere, as well as certain sheep's milk cheeses such as Pecorino. Milder cheeses, on the other hand, are often overpowered by the intensity of Icewine. Cheese-forward dishes, such as sweet chèvre soufflé with peach sauce, or an authentic, savory cheesecake, pair beautifully with Icewine, and when nutty elements are added to a cheese platter, the meal finishes on an especially memorable and satisfying note. Although there are no strict rules when it comes to pairing wine with food, and everyone ultimately needs to discover what works best for their own palate, there are still some basic principles worth keeping in mind. One commonly shared guideline is that a dish should be less sweet than the wine. While Icewine, perhaps, because of its price, is often paired with refined and luxurious dishes, in reality, it can be just as delightful when enjoyed with something as simple as a fresh pear or a piece of salty, aged hard cheese. Icewine truly shines when paired with fresh fruit tarts, gently stewed fruits, or vanilla roasted fruits. Desserts that are sweeter than the Icewine, however, can mute its character, preventing the wine's rich, luscious flavors from being fully appreciated. At the same time, ice wine has a full, concentrated texture, and dishes that are too delicate can easily be overwhelmed by its intensity. But don't let these so-called rules hold you back. If you have a bottle of ice wine and aren't sure what to pair it with, don't worry, be bold and experiment. You might just discover an unexpected and delightful surprise. Finally, let's talk about wine and health. Most people believe that wine plays an important role in promoting human health and well-being. In the 1990s, many scientists and nutritionists presented substantial scientific evidence showing that moderate wine consumption with meals may help reduce the risk of heart disease. Researchers observed that although the French consume more fat and cholesterol in their diet than Americans, the rate of heart attacks in France is only about 1/3 of that in the United States. This phenomenon is commonly known as the French paradox. Scientists believe that one key factor lies in the French habit of drinking wine with meals. Wine contains natural antioxidants, which may be one of the reasons behind its potential health benefits. Among them, the phenolic compound resveratrol is considered a key component that may help reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease, and may also play a role in preventing certain types of cancer. Phenolic compounds and polyphenols are a group of complex substances found primarily in grape skins. They give wine its distinctive aromas, flavors, and mouthfeel. Because red wine spends a longer time in contact with grape skins during fermentation, it contains higher levels of phenolic compounds than white wine, including resveratrol. Resveratrol is a natural antifungal compound found in the skins of grapes. It helps protect grapes from mold in cool, damp climates. The colder and more humid the climate, the more resveratrol grapes tend to produce as a defense against fungal disease. This is one of the fascinating characteristics of cool climate viticulture. Pinot Noir, in particular, contains relatively high levels of resveratrol, regardless of where it is grown. According to research by Dr. David Goldberg, professor of biochemistry at the University of Toronto, wines from regions such as Niagara, Burgundy, Oregon, and New York State have some of the highest concentrations of resveratrol. Resveratrol was also used in ancient Chinese medical system to help lower bad cholesterol and prevent blood clotting. But here, I have to add a few words of caution. Although the French paradox once led many to believe that moderate wine consumption is beneficial to health, modern medical scientists increasingly suggest that viewing wine as a health drink is an oversimplified and misleading idea. No level of alcohol use is safe for human health, and long-term excessive drinking can lead to cognitive decline, liver damage, and an increased risk of addiction. The idea that drinking wine is good for heart health often overlooks broader factors such as drinking patterns, overall diet, and social environment. There is no doubt that wine is a delicious beverage. Its layered aromas, well-defined structure, and remarkable compatibility with food have earned it an important place in dining culture. And undeniably, wine does contain components that may benefit the body. However, no matter how wonderful a wine may be, it should always be enjoyed in moderation. Only by understanding restraint can we truly experience the pleasure wine brings, rather than turning it into a burden on our health. As the old saying goes, a small drink brings joy, but excessive drinking causes harm. Finally, I'd like to leave everyone with one important reminder. No matter how delicious wine may be, or how beneficial it is believed to be for health, there is one rule that must always be kept in mind. Don't drink and drive. If you drive, don't drink. Be responsible to your family and others. Ice wine is not just a sweet wine. It is the crystallization of nature's power and human wisdom. Every drop captures the magic of winter, inviting us to slow down and savor the moment. If ice wine has sparked your curiosity, take the opportunity to enjoy a glass when you can. May every sip of ice wine be like life itself, pure, elegant, and beautifully sweet. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the world of ice wine. We hope you've enjoyed our program. If you'd like to learn more about ice wine, we recommend the following books: Icewine, Extreme Winemaking by Donald Zeraldo and Carl Kaiser. Icewine, The Complete Story by John Schreiner. These works offer deeper insight into the fascinating world of ice wine and the craftsmanship behind this remarkable wine. If you enjoy our program, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Thank you for your support. And we'll see you in the next program.